Donovan, excited to be with you here today. And one of the things that we want to talk about, just to help think through for ourselves, but for other people at Two Cities Church, is what does it look like and how do we effectively engage our neighbors with one another? And so, I think it would probably be helpful, in the Christian world, we use the neighbor in a lot of ways. And so what do we mean when we're talking about neighbors as we set up this conversation?
Yeah. So in Luke 10, Jesus asks, "Who's my neighbor?" And he gives the story of the Good Samaritan. And he uses that example because a Samaritan and a Jew would have been very opposed to each other. Culturally, they would not have interacted with each other. So he uses that to basically say, hey, anyone and everyone who has a need, who comes across your path in some way, shape, or form is probably your neighbor. But we're going to focus this conversation more specifically on, who are the people who live around you? Because that's going to actually give us a place to start where we can start to think about how do we actually be good neighbors to people. So really, I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that's a helpful understanding because I think this is an area where all of us can continue to grow, right? We don't want to just think about everyone as our neighbor, even though that is true, but I think God has specifically called us to people that he has placed around us, and that includes where we live. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And let's be honest, why are we having this conversation? Because being great neighbors and engaging our neighbors is not something that comes naturally and easy to us, right? It's something that we all struggle with in a number of ways. And so, one of the ways that I see that is just the way that we are influenced by culture, where we have this sense that, man, we are creatures of comfort. We come home and we see our homes as fortresses, not as lighthouses where we're reaching out to people or hospitals where we're meeting needs, but our homes are places where we drive into our garage, we close the door, and never actually engage because we have this mentality. It's like, man, we want to escape from the world, right? We want to be able to, just do our own thing, to do our, whatever in comfort and never actually have to engage the people around us. And so I think that's one of the struggles for why we just have a hard time with this. What else would you say?
I would also say we live a lot of our lives based on what's convenient for us. And even culturally, a lot of things are marketed to us based on how it's convenient to us. And the fact is that it's going to be inconvenient for us to be good neighbors. It's going to require us to get out of our fortress a little bit. It's going to require us to, take some time to interact with neighbors when we otherwise would have maybe preferred to be doing something else in our home, watching something at night or, this or that. It's going to require us to be inconvenienced. The other thing, too, is I think we're afraid to open up our real life. And that's another thing that is further kind of a stiff headwind culturally, too, of like we all want to put our best foot forward. We all want to present this, perfect image of ourselves, of our family, of this or that. And I think we're afraid to let people in to see the real us, to see our home, to see, what is our real life like behind those gates. And I think that also can be a fear and a hesitation for a lot of people.
Yeah, I like the word that you use, fear. I think that's just another one of the reasons generally is just the fear of the unknown. Like, what's going to happen if I do this? And what's interesting, just in my experience of, doing this myself and talking with other people, is oftentimes those fears are unfounded, where we're afraid of what can happen. But here's the thing. Our neighbors feel the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. We are fearful, they are fearful, and none of us are ever willing to take the step. And so what I see when we begin to talk about this, we can talk about a whole lot more of the reasons why we struggle to do this. But most of the reasons we have for not engaging our neighbors are weak, to be frank. And so I think one of the first steps for us to actually be good neighbors who engage the people that God has placed around us is to frankly just admit some of our weak excuses, to lay down our fear to the Lord, to talk with him and just repent of, just wanting to look good or be well thought of by others, whatever it might be, our comfort, our laziness. We have to lay those down before the Lord if we're ever going to make some movement. But I think at the same time, while we repent of those and push those away, we need to fill that with a right motivation. And so what do you think are some of the motivations that Christians ought to have? Some of the things that are propelling us forward to the people that God has placed around us, to engage them. What do we
Yeah.
see?
So if we believe in a sovereign God who's working all things out according to his will, and if we believe that's the God that we serve, then we have to believe that there's a sovereign purpose of why we are where we are. And I think God has a desire to use us to serve and to bless the people in our neighborhoods and next to us. And so the reality is, if we're unwilling to maybe press beyond our fears, repent of some of the boundaries or the things that we've put up, if we're unwilling to push past that, the reality is that some of those people who God has purpose for us to serve and bless and care for them, they're not going to be cared for. They're not going to be blessed. They're not going to be served because we're unwilling to do that. And the reality is, you don't change neighbors every year. So it's not like, oh, these guys didn't work out, I'm gonna replace them. That's usually not how it works. We're in a place for a while, and so if we're to be the ones God has given to serve and to bless and to care for and to even draw people, hopefully, to Himself, for faith, for salvation, then we need to be willing to step. That's certainly a motivation for us to do that.
Yeah, that's good. I think another thing that is helpful for us just to bear in mind is we are God's representation to the people around us. And one thing we know about God and his character is he is a hospitable God who has opened his life to us who didn't deserve that, who has pursued us when we were not pursuing him. And every time that we do that for our neighbors, every time we practice hospitality, we are putting flesh on the gospel story. And I think that's a beautiful reason to pursue this. And so, for most of us, if we can repent of our excuses to get a proper motivation, I think the next step for us is most of us are strangers to our neighbors. And so we're not going to go immediately from stranger to best friends or whatever that might be. I think the first step is moving simply from strangers to acquaintance. And so what does it look like for us to do that? I think, most practically, it's just meeting your neighbors, right? Some of us for the first time. And so what are some helpful things that people can do if that's our first step, to simply go out there and start being people that meet our neighbors?
Yeah. One thing I've heard from you is the always rule, which is, hey, I'm outside, I'm taking my trash out, I'm playing outside with my kids, for whatever reason, I'm out there, I'm working in the yard. If I see another neighbor outside doing something, I'm going to engage with them. At the very least, it's a wave and it's a how's it going today kind of thing. But hopefully you take a couple minutes and are able to even engage a little bit more than that and say, how was your weekend? What have you guys got coming up this weekend? What kind of plans you got going on? Like even little basic things like that. But it's like knowing that, hey, anytime I see someone, I'm always going to do that. That is going to be very helpful, especially if you're in a rhythm of doing that, in a habit of doing that. Very helpful in moving from stranger to acquaintance, to where they'll start to even probably do that with you as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think another thing is just get out of the fortress, like intentionally do that. Spend more time outside. Go on walks with your family. Play with your kids in the front yard. Move your grill to the front yard. Be that weirdo, but it's going to create more and more of these opportunities for you to move towards acquaintances. As you practice that always rule, it takes the guesswork out of it. You never have to decide, am I going to say something? Am I not? I'm going to do it every time we see something. And it's going to increase your that movement towards acquaintances. I think that goes a long way. And here's something I'll say as well. You can start this now, no matter who you are, where you're at. Some people, man, it's great when you have a fresh start. You move to a new home. You can do this more intentionally. I always encourage my friends or family that are doing this to see it as an opportunity, but you don't have to move to do this. You can choose right now. Today, I'm going to make a fresh start. You know what? You may have been a bad neighbor for the last 10, 15 years, whatever, but say, I'm going to commit to doing this today. I will practice the always rule from now on. And here's what you can do. An apology goes a long way. You can say, man, I've been a terrible neighbor. I'm sorry I've lived here 15 years and I haven't met you. You know what? They probably feel the same way. And an apology, a simple apology, can break all that down and just create new opportunities for
and actually stands out a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take the simple step of doing that, what you just said, hey, I want to apologize. I've not made an effort to get to know you guys or whatever that looks like. That in and of itself stands out.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very easy and good thing. We should all be doing that if we've not.
Well, Donovan, I think that's going to wrap up our first part about some of the motivations and some of the barriers that we have for engaging our neighbors. But in part two, we're going to get more practical and talk about what are some of the next steps that we need to take from there.
Looking forward to it.